Welcome to Quora Anonymous. If this is your first time and you like the video, please like and subscribe. If you would like to read along, turn on closed captioning with the 3 dots in the upper right corner. Now, let's begin. As a mechanic, what is the strangest thing you have seen in a customer's car? Not in Baton. We had a customer come in complaining of spongy brakes. So as I was new to the trade, I was always taught by my more experienced colleagues to always expect the worst of a customer. If they say they know nothing about cars, but say how they, God forbid it's happened since, looked on YouTube how to fix it, we basically overhaul and expect everything to be a cock-up. So as we do, before we take any car out on the road for a test drive, we check the brakes. Pump the pedal with the engine off, and if it goes rock hard, start her up, and check she dies down with the pressure. Well, as any mechanic will know, the pedal after a pad replacement goes soft as shit for the first few pumps to move the piston out. This one wasn't. Got her up on the lift, and to my disbelief I had seen the world's first self-made, self-returning brake piston. This is only ever known to happen on the likes of bikes, after you get a tank slapper. I'm glad I got photos, because nobody would believe me if I hadn't, and to this day I have zero clue how it even happened, yet more shockingly how the owner of the Jaguar couldn't smell burning rubber. Well, the driver's tire had ripped, got stuck between the inner brake pad and inner side of the brake disc. So when you press the pedal, the rubber's pushing the piston back out. We asked the customer if they could smell the rubber, and he said no. I'm glad he didn't try to drive it any further. So in 2001 I was working at the local Chevrolet dealer. I got a repair order for a 2001 Chevrolet Cavalier with her electric seat not adjusting around 11 AM. So I thought, awesome, this is an easy diagnosis and repair before lunch. Turns up it was super easy. There was a 8-inch lime green dildo jamming the mechanism. I totally put my nitrile gloves on, pulled it out, and called my buddy over to have a laugh with me. The seat worked fine, now that it wasn't jammed up by the dildo. Where things went totally bad was in the next sequence of events. The Green Beanie brand dildo has a suction cup base. In a moment of laughter / lack of judgment, I stuck it to the trunk lid like an antenna, and went to lunch. I fully had intended to return it under the seat and just no problem found the repair order, to save the owner embarrassment. While at lunch, the service writer came into my bay, checked the seat, and it worked, so he drove it from my bay to the customer waiting / delivery area. As I was told by the advisor, the little petite blonde college-age girl and her father were there to receive the vehicle. Then all hell broke loose as she rushed her dad to get in the car, and she jumped in and peeled out, thus leaving a short stripe of rubber on the freshly painted Chevrolet symbol on the floors. Meanwhile, her father forces her to turn back around as she is in tears to go back and get the paperwork. They pull back up, everyone is pointing and laughing. The old man gets out, sees what the fuss is all about, and flips shit on us for being suckers. So while the advisor is catching 9 levels of hell, the little girl fesses up to daddy, who gets embarrassed and storms out in the car again. I got suspended for the rest of the day. It was worth it, because that is easily one of my favorite mechanic stories. I never saw her return for service. Well, this is funny. When I had an auto repair shop, a man comes in and says he is having a hard time shifting his gear selector into any particular gear, like it's way too loose. This is an automatic transmission, so I jack it up, put stands under it, slide under on my creeper. I check out the linkage. It is so worn out it's ready to break off, so I take it apart, then take it to the vise. So I had lots of steel from fabricating hot rod frames, so I cut off the worn out pin, welded on a fabricated one with cotter pinhole, then made a new mating clevis, welded it. Now I'm underneath installing it. As I was finishing up, I saw something shiny hanging from the frame at the rear of the car. I rolled back there, and hanging still clamped to the frame was a pair of vice grips. So I unclamped them and rolled out from the car. I tested my job, it was like new, so I told the customer to try it. While he was trying his new linkage, I was looking at these vice grips. These had my initials welded in them, so I asked the customer, "Have you been here before?" He said yes, about 4 years ago. I showed him my tool with my initials welded in them. We started laughing. Back in the late 90s I worked at a service station in an area that had a diverse social and economic resident base. There were two infamous groups in the area we would have coming into the service station: hippies from a local commune called Ananda and members from the Church of Satan. The Ananda would always have a picture of some deity hanging from the rear view mirror and dried herbs and plants across the dashboard. The Satanists would have animal carcasses, like lizards and bat wings. We had one guy who had a cherry 68 Ford Bronco. He would bring it in for oil changes and always bragged about how it was 100% stock. I had an employee who had a really nice 54 Ford pickup. Well, it looked nice, but it was completely bastardized. The only thing Ford about it was the frame and body. It had a Chevy engine with a Cadillac automatic transmission and a Chevy rear end. These two guys would go back and forth in good humor, and the guy with the Bronco would always come back to how his was completely 100% original Ford that the truck was built with from the factory. Then one day the employee was doing a multi-point inspection, which was a way for us to increase the bill, so if they needed an air filter or add power steering fluid, etc. While he was checking the air filter he saw a loose hose. He started asking the customer about how original the truck was, knowing it would get the guy going, and of course the guy obliged, and told us all again how everything in the truck was 100% from the factory. Then the employee pulls on the loose air hose, holds up the loose end, and says, "I didn't know Ford made Golf tees." Evidently one of the hoses to the carburetor, probably the choke or something, wasn't needed, and the guy disconnected it and shoved a Golf tee in there to block the line from leaking. He was quite red-faced explaining that one. Back in the late 90s, I began my time at a Ford dealership as a technician. I had been working on vehicles/machinery since a kid, so it was a good fit. One day, right at closing time, a lady came in from about 50 miles away. She had a brand new first generation Ford Escape. It had only come out maybe a month prior, with less than 500 miles on the odometer. She complained about a shimmy/wobble from the front end and steering wheel vibration. Okay. So, preliminary check while parked outside and her watching, I look at the vehicle head on and notice the driver's front wheel out of alignment. Seriously out of alignment. I take a closer look and pop the center cap off the wheel, exposing the hub and axle assembly. This was a front wheel drive vehicle, and what I saw blew me away. There was no axle nut holding the hub to the threaded axle shaft. Judging from the condition of the hub, no witness marks and the absence of the nut itself, the retainer nut was never installed on this vehicle from the factory. This customer had driven all that way with only the caliper and brake disc assembly holding the wheel onto the vehicle. This one disturbed me, just thinking what could have happened had the brake disc or the caliper failed during her commute. A bag of weed. Okay, in and of itself, finding a bag of weed or other drugs in a customer vehicle is not all that strange. Sometimes, bags of drugs would get vacuumed up and later retrieved from the shop vac when management wasn't looking. Especially if the customer was a dick. Who is going to complain to management or the police that their illegal drugs went missing? This particular bag of weed was strange because of who the customer was, a little old lady who had to be 80 plus. She had brought her book in for an oil change and tire rotation. Nothing unusual about that, other than the car was about 10 years old and had about 6,000 miles on it. She was a widow, and given the lack of mileage and clean, pristine condition of the car, I'm certain that she was the sole driver of the car. I went to pop the trunk so I could check that the spare tire was aired up and in good shape, and found the key fob battery was dead. No problem, that particular generation of books had a trunk button in the glove box. I opened the glove box and lo and behold was a half ounce of some of the best quality Mary Jane I've ever seen, sitting on top of her registration and several old bulletins from the First Baptist Church. I finished the job and sent her home with a free key fob battery and her glaucoma medicine under shade. Years ago there was a pretty nasty tornado that ripped through 3 different cities, and it left the trees totally bare of their leaves and 4 to 6 foot drifts of hailstones about the size of baseballs. It destroyed roofs and patios and screen enclosures, and damned near every vehicle on the road. One side of every car looked like it had been hit by hundreds of hammer blows. Even the hubcaps and wheel covers were trashed. Of course, the local body shops were buried with repair work, as well as the roofers and aluminum siding and patio construction people and every window and door manufacturer all over the state. The insurance companies would repair whatever the damage was, and on most cars it was usually the roof, hood, trunk, glass, and body panels on one side of the car. For some reason, people who were driving seemed to have less damage than the cars that were parked. Something about getting hit by a hailstone while moving dispersed the energy and causes fewer serious dents or broken glass. I was working at a repair shop which was located next to one of the larger body repair shops, and for months there was a steady stream of cars arriving every day for repairs of estimates. I eventually ended up helping the body shop owner handle some of the estimates and dealing with the overwhelming stream of customers. On one particular day, a guy came in driving a really nice, almost new El Camino. The entire vehicle, all four sides and the top, as well as the hubcaps and beauty rings, looked like it had been through direct machine gun fire. And that was when I learned a little secret about hail damage. When a hailstone hits a car, it makes a really deep dent, but it does not chip the paint. Many of the hail damaged cars were repaired with a propane torch and a chunk of dry ice. Heat up the area around the dent and press a piece of dry ice on it, and many of the dents will pop back out. He looked over the El Camino and showed me that every dent had a paint chip in the bottom, so it was a dead giveaway that the car was not damaged by hail, but a ball-peen hammer. It turned out that guy had the car parked in a garage when the storm hit, but he wanted the car a different color, so realizing that the insurance company would only paint one side of the car with the damage, he decided that the entire car needed to be covered in dents to get the entire thing repainted the colors he wanted. Too bad for him that his nearly brand new car was rejected by the insurance company, and the adjuster informed him that if he pressed the issue they would have him arrested and charged with fraud. So for the next several years, he ended up driving around in his lumpy, bumpy El Camino. You are going to be sorry you asked, and good luck getting the image out of your head at the end. An older woman, had to be in her mid to late 60s, possible early 70s, was complaining about a strange rolling and thump sound coming from under the car on acceleration and braking that she swore she could also feel. Drove it with her, verified it as something rolling around under the seat, and returned to the parking lot. I got out and proceeded to look under the seat and was presented with an uncomfortable dilemma, which the customer noticed and asked me what's wrong. Me, oh nothing, just deciding what to do. What do you mean, is it dangerous? Me, not exactly. Then what are you waiting for? Me, I should go get your service advisor first, a woman. Why? Just pull the damn thing out and show it to me. Bad word choice. Me, I really should go get the advisor first. Stop making me wait for it. Just pull it out and show me. Bad wording. Me, okay then. I grab the rag I always keep in back my pocket, reach under the seat and pull the object out wrapped in the rag and set it on the floor that way. Well, aren't you going to show me? Me, I'll just leave it here and go get the advisor so she can close the ticket out and you can be on your way. Is there something wrong? Just hand it to me and I'll have a look for myself. Me, so I hand it to her. She unwraps it and stares at it for what felt like an eternity, looks me in the eye and says, "What the hell, haven't you ever seen a plastic dick before?" I'm old, not dead, and finding a functioning man of my age is damn near impossible. Me, yes ma'am, sorry ma'am. I'll go get the advisor so you can be on your way, and I slinked off at a brisk pace. 1992 Oldsmobile Silhouette minivan with V6. Loud knocking noise that sounded like all the rod bearings completely gone. Pull the oil pan and bearing caps. All good. Poke around at stuff and WTH. The timing chain wobbles in ways it should not. Remove the timing cover and the camshaft sprocket almost falls off. All three bolts had unscrewed themselves, and their heads were chewing into the inside of the timing cover. Since that's open, I get a new timing chain and sprockets to install. When I look up the cam sprocket bolt torque specs, I find the problem. They are specified at 15 inch-pounds. Someone at General Motors made an oopsie that somehow got into the instructions for their engine assemblers and to Motors and Chilton's for their manuals. These are grade 8 bolts. Bolts of that same thread size used for oil pans are commonly specified to be tightened to 10 to 15 foot-pounds, and they are not grade 8. Since the torque spec is obviously wrong, I installed a new timing set with the cam bolts at 15 foot-pounds. That van went many thousands of miles and never had that problem again. I encountered a few others of those plastic fantastic vans with that same noise and told owners and mechanics about the wrong torque spec on the sprocket bolts. Saved people a lot of money. If you made it this far, you owe it to yourself to subscribe.